A troubled child since the pubescent, I remember fights as an adolescent. My past wasn't the most pleasant, but I didn't understand that until the present. I believe that my poetry is the truest, most honest expression of myself. It's when I'm most transparent and most vulnerable. I used to write throughout my recovery. It's something that really helped me cope because throughout my first year of sobriety, I was going through a lot. I lost a lot of friends of mine that were, struggling with addiction. I used to blame myself. It was a very tough time for me. I started using in 2016. With me, my usage and my addiction was because of trauma. I used it as a scapegoat, trying to get away from, my feelings. My brother got arrested in 2015. I was 17 years old. I kind of went down a path where I was just by myself. It started out with marijuana, then went to benzos, Xanax, drinking, Percocet, fentanyl, and I stuck with fentanyl. And throughout that time period, I overdosed several times, got into a lot of different stuff, got shot at. I have a lot of friends of mine that had passed away. Allah may Allah have mercy on them. And throughout that time period, it was kind of back and forth. I would try to get sober, try to get clean, go back to it, try to stay out the way, end up getting in the mix. Growing up as a Somali second generation immigrant, your family comes here from war. A lot of our parents don't know how to cope with trauma. And so I don't think I really even knew what my coping mechanisms were until I got sober and started going to therapy. Parents would call us, of course, like, hey, my son is using, my daughter's using, I wanna do an intervention. And I think the biggest thing that we've come across is parents have a lack of education and understanding what recovery and addiction truly is, whether it's a generational gap, a culture gap, a language barrier. A lot of times parents and children don't understand each other. A lot of people in our community, thought about it as, hey, and I'll say this in Somali, like they want to hide and they feel like it's a shame. And so speaking about it in an open space caused a lot of controversy because they felt like, like we're putting shame on our community, we're putting shame on our people. This is something that should be dealt with in secrecy. There's children that are, 15, 16, 17 years old. Their parents, tuck them in bed at night or, say goodnight to them and they wake up in the morning and the child is dead. And it's very heartbreaking. And I think that the biggest thing that is needed is education. And that doesn't mean just advocacy. In order for people to really realize what's going on, they need to understand, what mental health is, what addiction is, what are the telltale signs of, how to spot somebody that's struggling with addiction, how can you help them, how does your cultural beliefs impact a child or a family member that is struggling with addiction, which are all important conversations. A lot of times the biggest thing that people fail to understand is that the substance use isn't the biggest problem that most people that are dealing with addiction are dealing with, right? There's underlying issues, there's trauma, there's pain. Throughout this, poetry book, I cover grief, survivor's guilt, imposter syndrome. I have a poem called Past, where it's speaking about how it's been so hard for me to get over my past and overcome it, not only through myself, but how others view me as well, and kind of just overcoming that want for validation from other people. The most powerful part about sharing your story is that you're owning up to you and accepting yourself for who you are. So I don't think I wrote it for a specific audience. I just wrote it to write it. You know what I mean? Just to kind of put it out there. And I think that it'd be helpful to people that are struggling with addiction, but I also think that it'd be helpful to anybody, because I think that the truest and most universal language of mankind is pain. Everybody experiences pain.